Imagine spending the last 8 years of your life locked in a tower. Not a dungeon, not a dark cell, a marble tower. One with windows that overlook the single most beautiful building in human history. Something you built. Now imagine that building is a tomb, the tomb of the only woman you ever truly loved. And every single day until the day you die, that is the last thing you see through the window. Your greatest creation, her grave. This is not a story about love, not entirely. It is a story about obsession so consuming it shattered an empire, about a man who built heaven on earth and then watched his world collapse into something far darker. It is about the secrets buried beneath 20,000 tons of white marble. Secrets the history books barely whisper about. It's the most visited monument on earth. Over 8 million people walk through its gates every year, starting at its reflection in still water, calling it romantic, calling it beautiful. But nobody tells you what it cost. Not in gold, in blood, in broken minds, in a family torn completely apart. This is that story. The woman who died giving him his 14th child. It was June of 1631. The Mughal army was camped in the Deccan, that vast, unruly stretch of southern India that had resisted Mughal control for decades. Shah Jahan, the emperor of the known world, was at war, and yet this most beloved wife, Taj Mahal, had insisted on following him into the field, as she had done for years. As she always did, she was 38 years old and she was about to give birth to their 14th child. The tent she labored in that night was not fit for an empress, it was campaign tent, lit by oil lamps, surrounded by the sounds of an army at rest, horses, distant fires, the murmur of soldiers. She had survived 13 pregnancies. She had crossed deserts and battlefields carrying his children. She had been his companion, his confidante, his political advisor for 19 years. But this night, something was different. The labor lasted 30 hours. The child, a girl named Jahanara, survived. Mumtaz did not. Contemporary court historians, including Abdul Hamid Lahori, whose Padshah-nama remains one of the most detailed chronicles of Shah Jahan's reign, describe what followed as something almost frightening to witness. The emperor, one of the most powerful men alive, collapsed. He refused food for 8 days. When he finally emerged from his private chambers, his black hair had reportedly turned grey. He banned music from court for 2 full years. He wore white, the color of mourning, for months. This was grief, yes, but history does not let us stop there, because what came next revealed something deeper, something that began to look less like love and more like an obsession that had always been lurking beneath the surface, one that death had now fully unleashed. 20,000 hands, 22 years, and a secret that was never meant to leave Agra. The decision to build the Taj Mahal was made almost immediately, not months later, almost the same year. And the scale of what Shah Jahan envisioned was so staggering, so unprecedented that even the most senior architects in his court must have privately questioned whether it was even possible. He did not want a tomb. He wanted something that had never existed. He wanted a building that looked like it had descended from paradise itself. More than 20,000 workers were conscripted, not hired, conscripted from across the empire. Artisans from Persia, stonecutters from Rajputana, calligraphers from Ottoman Empire, jewel inlayers from Samarkand. The white marble was hauled over 300 miles from Makrana in Rajasthan, carried on the backs of over 1,000 elephants. Semi-precious stones, lapis lazuli, turquoise, jade, coral, carnelian were imported from as far as China, Tibet, Afghanistan, and the Arabian Peninsula. It took 22 years, and here is the detail that no travel guide ever tells you. There is a persistent historically debated account, cited by some travelers and later historians, that Shah Jahan had hands of the master craftsman served after the Taj was completed. The intention allegedly was to ensure nothing like it could ever be built again. No structure would rival it, no rival commission would equal it. Historians are divided on this claim. There is no conclusive court documentation proving it happened, but what is chilling is that several of the artisans and laborers involved in the Taj construction simply vanished from historical record after 1653. No payments, no further imperial commissions, no mention for a workforce of that size serving an empire that meticulously documented everything. That silence is its own kind of answer. He who has seen the Taj Mahal has seen a dream that the walking word was not meant to contain. Paraphrase from various Mughal court records, Agra, c. 1650. The Taj was completed around 1653, and by then the empire that had built it had already begun to fracture from within. Jahanara, the daughter who became an empress in everything but name. When Mumtaz Mahal died, her eldest surviving daughter was 17 years old. Her name was Jahanara Begum, and in the months that followed her mother's death, something shifted in the Mughal court that historians have never fully resolved, and that contemporary accounts describe with a kind of careful, deliberate vagueness that itself tells a story. Shah Jahan elevated Jahanara to a position that had no real precedent in Mughal history. She was given the title Padshah Begum, the first lady of the empire. She was granted the revenue of the port city of Surat, one of the wealthiest trading posts in the world. She managed the imperial harem, oversaw court protocol, and by all available evidence, had her father's ear in ways that even his most senior ministers did not. She was, in every functional sense, the Empress of Hindustan, except she was not married to the emperor. She was his daughter. Now let us be precise here, because this matters. There is no documented, conclusive historical proof of any inappropriate relationship between Shah Jahan and Jahanara. What the historical record does confirm is the following. She never married. In a royal court where strategic marriages were the primary currency of power, where every princess was a diplomatic asset to be deployed in an alliance, Jahanara remained unmarried her entire life by her father's decision. When asked about it directly, Shah Jahan allegedly said that a woman of her caliber could only be matched with someone of equivalent stature, and there was no man alive who was her equal. Which sounds like a compliment, unless you think about what it actually means. European travelers passing through Agra in 1640s and 50s, including the French physician Francois Bernier, whose memoirs are considered among the most reliable outside accounts of the Mughal court during this period, recorded whispered rumors about the nature of Shah Jahan's attachment to Jahanara. Bernier himself was careful. He noted the rumors, noted the extraordinary closeness between father and daughter, and declined to draw explicit conclusions. But he did not dismiss the rumor either. What we know for certain is this: Jahanara was the most powerful woman in the empire, entirely by her father's will, and the nature of that elevation was strange enough that people noticed and wrote about it even at the time. But then something happened in 1644 that put all of this under a horrifying new light. A candle, a silk dupatta, a fire that spread too fast. Jahanara was badly burned. Her clothes caught fire near a lamp in the palace. She survived, but the injuries were severe and he was bedridden for months. Shah Jahan's response was again extreme in a way that made even his court uncomfortable. He cancelled all public duties. He reportedly stayed at her besides. He had the empire's finest physicians summoned from across Asia. He declared a public fast. He released prisoners from the imperial jails as a form of prayer for her recovery. A father's love for a daughter? Absolutely possible. But the sheer scale of the imperial machinery mobilized for one injured girl in a court full of women and children, it was noted, it was talked about, and it was never fully explained. The War of Sons, when the empire began to eat itself. Shah Jahan had 4 sons, and in Mughal tradition, a tradition inherited from the Timurid and Central Asian dynasties before them. There was no concept of a fixed succession. The eldest son did not automatically inherit the throne. Instead, when an emperor grew old or fell ill, the sons fought literally. The one who survived became emperor. It sounds barbaric. It was designed to be. The theory was brutal but coherent. Only the strongest, most cunning, most politically capable son would survive the war of succession. Weakness was filtered out at the source. In 1657, Shah Jahan fell gravely ill. The rumor spread through the empire faster than fire. The emperor was dying, and all four sons, Dara Shikoh, Shah Shuja, Murad Bakhsh, and Aurangzeb, began to move. What followed was one of the most psychologically complex succession wars in Mughal history, not because of the battles, though those were brutal, but because of what it revealed about every player involved. Dara Shikoh was Shah Jahan's favorite. He was a philosopher, a poet, a man deeply interested in Sufi mysticism and Hindu spiritual traditions. Shah Jahan had openly named him Crown Prince, a break from tradition that immediately alienated the conservative religious establishment and three of his other sons. Dara was brilliant, but he was also arrogant. He underestimated Aurangzeb. Aurangzeb was different, cold where his brother was warm, calculating where Dara was impulsive. Deeply, almost furiously religious in a way that gave him enormous credibility with the army's orthodox Muslim core. He had spent years as a provisional governor, building loyalty, building quiet alliances waiting. The war was swift and decisive. By 1658, Aurangzeb had outmaneuvered all three brothers. Shah Shuja and Murad were eliminated. Dara Shikoh, the crown prince, the father's chosen heir, was captured publicly, paraded through Delhi in chains, and executed. His severed head was reportedly sent back to Shah Jahan as a message, and the old emperor, who had by now recovered from his illness, was stripped of his throne, not killed, imprisoned. Shah Jahan spent the last 8 years of his life locked in the Musamman Burj, the octagonal tower of Agra fort, comfortable by the standards of a prison, furnished with his personal belongings, attended by servants. But a prison nonetheless, and from the windows of that tower across the bend of the Yamuna river, he could see the white dome of the Taj Mahal gleaming in the morning light every single day. The tower, the telescope, and the irony that has not equal in history. There is a detail recorded by several court accounts and later historians that has the quality of something almost too poetic to be real, and yet the evidence for it's consistent enough to take seriously. In the final years of his imprisonment, Shah Jahan reportedly kept a small mirror or reflective device near his window, angled specifically to catch the distant reflection of the Taj Mahal. On days when his eyesight failed, he was in his mid to late 60s by now, frail, broken. He would look at the reflection rather than the building itself. Think about what that means. The man who had redirected the resources of an empire, who had moved mountains of marble, commanded thousands of craftsmen, imported the rarest gems on earth, was now reduced to squinting at a reflection in a small mirror, just to see the tomb he had built for the woman he had loved. Jahanara crucially stayed, despite everything, despite the political risk, despite Aurangzeb's victory. She chose to remain imprisoned alongside her father. She could have made her peace with Aurangzeb. She had the political standing to do so. Instead, she stayed in the Agra fort until Shah Jahan died in January of 1666. She was with him at the end. By all accounts, she held his hand. After his death, Aurangzeb, in moment of either genuine filial piety or cold political theatre, honored her for her loyalty. He restored her title, restored her alliance, and she lived out the rest of her life as a respected figure at court. She died in 1681 and was buried at her own request in the simple open-air grave in Delhi, with no roof over it. She left instructions that her epitaph should read, "Let nothing but green grass cover my grave, for grass suffices as a covering for the poor in spirit. For a woman who had once been the most powerful person in Mughal Empire, that epitaph lands like a confession of something she never said aloud. Historians estimated that the Taj Mahal cost the equivalent of roughly 1 billion US dollars in today's money. But the financial cost is almost beside the point when you look at what it represented structurally for the Mughal Empire. Shah Jahan's reign was one of the most expensive in Mughal history. The Taj was not his only project. He rebuilt the Red Fort in Delhi. He constructed the Jama Masjid, still the largest mosque in India. He built the Peacock Throne, a seat so encrusted with precious stones that it took 7 years to complete and was valued at more than the Taj Mahal itself. He fought wars in Central Asia that drained the treasury without producing any meaningful territorial gain. The result was an empire that was architecturally magnificent and financially fragile. By the time Shah Jahan fell ill in 1657, the treasury was stretched thin, the army was restless, and the provincial governors were powerful enough to act semi-independently. The conditions for the succession war were not created only by ambition, they were created by decades of imperial overextension, funded by a man who could not stop building. Aurangzeb, when he finally took power, understood this clearly. He was the opposite of his father in almost every way. He lived simply, he rejected luxury. He reportedly sewed his own prayer caps and sold them to supplement his personal expenses so as not to use imperial funds. He tightened the treasury, reversed many of his father's expensive projects, and imposed a fiscal discipline the empire had not seen in decades. And yet, in one of history's great ironies, it was Aurangzeb's reign, not Shah Jahan's, that truly began the empire's terminal decline. His religious policies, his decades-long war in the Deccan, his destruction of a political coalition his father had painstakingly built, all of it created fractures that the empire never recovered from. He died in 1707 at the age of 88, still fighting, still unable to accept that the empire he had imprisoned his father to protect was already dying. The Mughal Empire effectively ended as a meaningful political force within 50 years of his death. What the marble was always hiding. Here is what haunts me about this story. The Taj Mahal was built as an act of love. That is true. Shah Jahan's grief was real. Mumtaz Mahal was, by every account, genuinely beloved, not simply as wife but as a partner. The monument he built for her is objectively one of the most extraordinary things human hands have ever produced. But it was built by 20,000 people who had no choice. It was funded by an empire that was quietly bankrupting itself. It was completed by craftsmen whose subsequent fate history cannot or will not fully account for. It was surrounded by a family destroyed by jealousy, succession, violence, and something between obsession and love that the historical record refuses to clearly name. And the man who built it died in a tower, starting at it from across a river, surrounded by guards, held there by his own son, the son he had chosen not to give the throne, who repaid that rejection by taking everything. Every year, 8 million people stand before the Taj Mahal and call it a symbol of love. And maybe it is, but it is also a monument to obsession, to grief that consumed an emperor, to the price paid by everyone who was not the emperor, to a daughter who gave up her entire life to stay by a father's side and chose, in the end, to be buried under open sky, with nothing to mark her grave but grass. The most beautiful building in the world sits on a foundation of extraordinary human cost. That's not a reason to stop finding it beautiful, but it is a reason to really look at what beauty sometimes requires. And the next time you see a photograph of that white dome reflected in still water, just remember, somewhere above that reflection in a tower on the other bank, an old man once looked back. The most dangerous thing about the Taj Mahal is not what it shows you, it is what it hides. If history like this is what you came here for, the real history, the dark history, the kind they never taught you, hit subscribe. Empireon goes where the textbooks stop.